Hey, just a quick warning at the start of this video. This will not be the most visually exciting thing. It's much more of an audio and discussion based video. So just a quick reminder to maybe put it in the background, treat it as a podcast, grab your favorite snack and drink, and grind some PokeMMO while you listen to it. Yo, what's up? My name's Patrouski, and I've been playing PokeMMO for 11 years and have a bit over 9,000 hours if you count alt accounts. This is an opinion piece video that I'm presenting today. Everything I say today is informed by feelings and anecdotal experience from a player and not someone with proper game design education or work experience in that field. Feel free to disagree with everything I say respectfully in the comments. Your opinion is just as valid as mine and should be shared so we get a better perspective of the community as a whole. Now, I want to start things off by saying that I am super lucky to have a decent understanding of the game and very privileged in a position to be able to see data on the community and the player base via my YouTube analytics that many others don't have access to. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one by any means, but it's more than what the average player has in terms of guesstimating the game's player base numbers, since those statistics are not provided by the staff publicly. It's also important to note that PokeMMO is an extremely international game, with it resonating with so many different people across the world, which I think is an absolutely beautiful thing. It's important to remember that the English-speaking player base probably only represents around 20 to 30% of the total player base, with the Spanish and Chinese player bases being much larger. Once again, we don't have any data on this, and I am just guesstimating based on GTL listings, Mandarin forum posts, and Bilibili viewership. Just in case you aren't aware, Bilibili is a video sharing and streaming website very similar to YouTube that is more used and popular in China comparatively. All of this preamble and qualifications that I'm currently making are important to paint you an idea of where I'm coming from when I talk about issues in this game, what perspectives I see, etc. So let's finally get to it. What is the biggest problem in PokeMMO? A lot of you might have seen this coming, but I believe it is player retention. And to narrow down the point even further, I specifically want to talk about PokeMMO being a seasonal game for many players, and possibly how to solve that, or at least ease the burden a little bit. Now, what is a seasonal game? What I mean when I say this is that it's a game that people pick up every few months, play for a few months, and then drop it again, rinse and repeat. And now there are a fair bit of games that are successful operating like this. Things like Minecraft, things like Stardew Valley, old school RuneScape are all somewhat seasonal games for many players. They all have their dedicated player base that sticks around a lot longer, but your average player plays for a little bit, moves on, and then comes back to the game months or years later. Why does this happen? What makes for a seasonal game? Well, in PokeMMO's case, I believe it's due to what is known as event season. Event season refers to the big three holiday events that happen every year in PokeMMO: Halloween, Christmas, and the Lunar New Year event. Events usually offer the best Pokeyen per hour in-game, exciting new content, and even new legendaries to catch. All of these events usually happen on the day of the holiday, so usually on October 31st, on December 25th, and sometimes usually between January 21st and February 20th for the Lunar New Year event. Okay, so PokeMMO is really busy from October 31st to January. Is that it? Just 3 to 4 months? Well, not really. You see, if you want to make the most out of an event season, you have to start preparing for the event season, which prep work usually begins in August, because the later you start, the more stingy the market becomes, as less players are willing to spend their Pokeyen closer to the event. So many moneymakers become much less effective the closer you are to an event about to happen. Early prep work is super important. Grinding for Pokeyen and the Pokemon needed to do possible PVM challenges begins in early August and lasts for about 3 months until October 31st, when all of your hard work can finally pay off and the Halloween event drops. So players often grind 3 months just to be able to grind the Halloween event for 10 plus hours a day for about 14 days. Whew, but now thankfully that's over. Now we can relax until Christmas, right? Wrong. Now you have to start preparing for Christmas. Start making more Pokeyen for investments. Start preparing possible raid Pokemon for the possible raids that might happen, for the event that might not even happen, because nothing is scheduled, nothing is guaranteed. The PokeMMO devs don't set deadlines, of course. Now, before it becomes a raging tangent, I do want to address the elephant in the room. You don't have to do any of this. Players that do this, like myself, often enjoy the hectic grind and rush to do it as much as possible during event season. It's totally okay to just accept the fact that you don't need to do everything. However, for the players that choose to do everything, and I think it's important to highlight it is our choice, it can often leave players feeling burnt out in February once the event season has finally ended. And most of this happening is all totally fine in my opinion. It's totally okay to have a ton of exciting content and then take a break from a game. There's also nothing wrong with promoting long-term grinding and then rewarding those players for doing so. This is an MMO. So most of this is totally fine. Everything I'm explaining here is mostly totally healthy for a game. Where is the problem? The problem comes with the realization that after event season is over, we have nothing concrete to look forward to until next October. And that's where the problem really starts. The PokeMMO player base seems to hard decline after event season, which once again is a totally healthy thing and should happen after such a long and exciting period. Everything that heats up also needs to cool off. But I do think that the length and extent of the cool off is the problem I'm worried about. And as much as I love event season and I love making content around it, I do think it is kind of problematic for PokeMMO. All of the expected content for the game happens within a few months, and then we are iced for half a year. Now, in fairness, historically, we will often get an update in the summertime, usually quality of life stuff like a PC or in-game UI overhaul, which is very appreciated. Or if we're feeling super lucky that year, we'll get a whole new event like the anniversary event. Now, that has only happened once, but a man can dream. But in the worst case scenario, we get nothing, which is what happened last year as I'm recording this video, and it left the players feeling very down about PokeMMO. Now, I personally am a big believer that PokeMMO is essentially a sandbox game and has infinite content. I don't personally need updates to enjoy the game. And I would argue that the average player isn't even as upset about the lack of updates as they are about the lack of communication. If we just knew what the devs were working on, if we knew what was in store, what they were looking at, possible nerfs in the future, I believe it would ease a lot of the players' worries. From February to August is just months of uncertainty, waiting, and anxiety for a lot of the players. And I know that might seem dramatic when we're talking about a video game, but you have to keep in mind that people dump thousands of hours into MMOs. Specifically, MMOs are a very passionate player base. People really, really care about these things. This is the things that can be a stabilizer for a lot of people's lives. They could play PokeMMO for 10 years. They could play PokeMMO for 5 years. After a bad breakup, they could log on PokeMMO. After getting married, they could log on PokeMMO. People really care about these games, and I think it's important to care about passions and desires and hobbies like this. So as a quick recap, the problem is that we have too much content all at once, followed by a severe lack of content combined with little to no communication. So how do we solve this problem? A critique without a decently thought out solution to offer up as an option is no critique at all. There are two things that I personally believe would fix a lot of these problems and keep PokeMMO as a more consistent game for many players. Number one is a dev blog at least every month that could consist of something as simple as bullet points of all the things the devs are keeping an eye on, possible ideas for new content, nerfs, buffs, etc. It means a lot when the community sees a problem that is clear as day for us, and for the devs to also say, hey, don't worry, we see that problem too and are working on a fix. Being on the same wavelength does wonders for any human relationship, whether romantic, friendly, or even developer to player. It would ease a lot of players' worries, cooling hostility towards them, and often softening the blow when things like nerfs happen. Recently, netballs were nerfed, and while I had been predicting that for months and was expecting it, many more casual players who aren't watching PokeMMO streams 24/7 may not have been aware that it was such a contentious topic. Many people prepared full teams of Vaporeons and bought thousands of netballs right before the nerf, and that feels really bad for those players. Now, the nerf has shown to be nothing but a positive for the game, helping the Ditto economy, making more money for Ditto farmers, and all the other aid group prices have adjusted accordingly. On top of the Pokeball meta being more diverse now, as opposed to always using netball. It's been nothing but a good change, but players are still upset about it. Why? Because they were blindsided. They didn't have any time to adjust. Now, many players will still complain no matter what, and there's only so much you can do within your control. But I think letting players know months in advance, hey, we're keeping an eye on net balls, no immediate changes will be made, but we are evaluating if they are too strong, would have done wonders to soften the blow and give people time to adjust to the change. Unfortunately, whether a change is good or bad, humans often have a hard time with it. I wish we were more open-minded and accepting, and we should work on evaluating things more objectively in these cases, but we just, on average, aren't that. So instead of throwing our hands in the air and saying it is what it is, we should do what we can within our control to make it easier for those players to adapt to the change. This will also allow better critique, as players will have had months to formulate an opinion before fighting back against a change, versus being super angry day one because they logged on to play the game and they have to adapt their whole strategy just to be able to ditto farm for 2 hours for the only free time they may have that day. A dev blog increasing communication between the devs and the player base would offer more time for players to adjust to changes, let us empathize with the devs, and see that they see the same problems in the game that we see, or allow them to point out problems that we can't see from our perspective as the player. There are a lot of positives, but what are the downsides of a dev blog? The downsides of a dev blog are that open communication does open them up to more legal scrutiny and player scrutiny. And that's why it's really important for our job, our responsibility as players, to be understanding and patient with the devs, assuming good faith and that they actually want what's best for the game, and they aren't just stinky goblins who just want to milk the player base. If your assumption is the latter, then it is impossible to have any productive discussion with you, and it's just better that you go play a game that you actually enjoy and trust the devs. If you're jumping into a discussion assuming bad faith or assuming malice, then there's nothing that can be done. You're helpless. That situation is helpless, so the only thing we can do is assume the best of each other. The number 2 solution I would like to propose is a summer event or some piece of scheduled content. The anniversary event was one of the best events I've ever seen, and part of it might have come from its timing. Summertime is generally quite good for PokeMMO. Kids and college students are on break from school, and I'm sure there are a ton of teachers who also play PokeMMO who are also off. School janitors, principals, board members, etc. It's shocking how many people are involved in the school system in the world and may want to experience some nostalgia with PokeMMO in their off time. Consistently bringing back the anniversary event or some kind of scheduled piece of content in June or July would do so much to maintain a consistent stream of players in PokeMMO. Waiting 4 to 5 months for a new major update is reasonable in my opinion, and would give players the right amount of time to cool off and do what grinds they want/enjoy, but still have something to look forward to on the horizon. You don't want all big events all the time. Constantly flashy updates have 2 big problems. Number 1, it makes players feel pressured to do the efficient, new, and exciting thing as opposed to consistently shiny hunting that Charmer that they've wanted for so many years but can't seem to finish the hunt. And number 2, if big and flashy is always the focus, quality of life updates and fixing content you already have in the game becomes an afterthought, and a poorly maintained game without proper quality of life updates leads to a disgruntled player base. PokeMMO is one of the rare games that doesn't solely focus on big flashy updates to make the most amount of money to appease shareholders. This was a big point of concern in the high-level community when I played old school RuneScape, and I would argue it's a big reason why Overwatch, or now known as Overwatch 2, is not as prominent as it once was. Constant big and flashy updates does equal more money in the short term, but it also equates to a less balanced and lower quality product over time. So I believe that one consistent event or one other sort of piece of scheduled content in the summertime would be the perfect amount to make PokeMMO much more consistent as a game and retain players year-round versus so many of the players being seasonal and only returning for big flashy events. We will still see those players, of course. This doesn't solve the problem, but I believe it will help it tremendously. And I think we need to start working towards those help tremendously but doesn't fully solve problem solutions. That's generally how things work. When seatbelts were invented, did they prevent all car crash deaths? No, but they tremendously improved the survival rating. You wouldn't not wear your seatbelt just because it doesn't solve the problem entirely. I think sometimes people throw out helpful measures entirely just because they don't solve the problem entirely, which isn't always logical. In 2021, when I started making PokeMMO content, I said that the biggest problem was player retention in PokeMMO, and now 3 years later, I believe it still is. But it has been getting better. I also said that in 2021, the best update we could see to help with player retention would be some sort of endgame PVM piece of content. I said, quote unquote, something like dungeons or raids. This was much more unheard of back then, but earlier this year, we saw raids beta tested within the game for the first time in February, and also brought back just recently for Halloween raids. This is objective proof and evidence that the devs do listen and do understand the problems, but there's still more to be done. We are super fortunate to play a game that is attached to such a popular IP, which brings in many new players consistently. So many players are constantly just finding out about PokeMMO for the first time in 2024 or 2025, which is incredible and an amazing thing that not many other old MMOs have the privilege of. Most old school MMOs are just slowly dying off over time. PokeMMO is one of the unique ones that seems to be growing. We are really fortunate to have such an incredibly unique game and to be in such a unique position with extremely talented developers who have had to overcome so many challenges that no other dev has had to face before. I do just want to also see those developers communicate and work with the players to make PokeMMO the best Pokemon game ever. We have a great game, a great community, and I don't want to take that for granted. But I also want to always push forward and look at what we can improve. I want people to be able to enjoy PokeMMO year-round and for many years to come. Thank you so much for watching up until this point. I know it visually isn't the most exciting piece of content, but these are my heartfelt thoughts from a PokeMMO veteran. If you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to actually click the like button on YouTube to let me know. If you didn't like it for whatever reason, feel free to dislike. Subscribe to see a new PokeMMO video every single day, plus streams around 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. ET on Twitch and YouTube. Discord is down below to join a super cool and helpful community, and if you find my content helpful enough to warrant it, going above and beyond with YouTube memberships, Twitch subs, Twitch primes, and PayPal/Venmo donations really allow me to be here in the first place. Thank you all for your time and for listening. Much love to you all, and good luck on your PokeMMO journey. Hey, what's up? Patrouski here, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching until the very end of the video. That means the world to me, and if your name is listed here, that means you went above and beyond and supported the channel financially, which allows me to even be here and have the time to do this. So thank you so very much.